Hey, what's up everybody? Tony with Lido Loca. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. There are some epic brand battles that exist in the world. I'm thinking Coke versus Pepsi. I'm thinking McDonald's versus Burger King. And in the cruising space, is there no battle more epic than Carnival Cruise Lines versus Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines? Now, we've cruised on 5 different cruise lines, and every time we come back from a cruise, whether it's a cruise line we've been on before or whether it's a new cruise line, there's always the question, what is your favorite cruise line? How did it compare to Carnival? How did it compare to Royal? And look, I haven't been on enough cruise lines. I don't have the data to really substantiate that. I can give my opinion, but I'm just one dude. If there was only somewhere we could go where there were more criteria than just one guy and one girl talking about their favorite cruise line, well, hey, don't fret. 2020, the list is out. U.S. News and World Report, they make this survey every year to determine which cruise line is the best cruise line for the money, and they've got a list out for 2020. And spoiler alert, Royal Caribbean takes the top of the list. But look, I'm wearing the NASA shirt today for a couple reasons. First, I've been binge watching the TV show on Apple TV Plus called For All Mankind. It's a reimagining of the space race in the 1960s and 1970s where the Russians actually made it to the moon first. It's been a pretty good show, so shout out to NASA. But number 2 is really, I'm into these data-driven results. Now, there's going to be a lot of different surveys out there, but this one is pretty well established. They do it year after year, and they have some pretty interesting criteria. Again, crowning Royal Caribbean #1 in the Royal Caribbean versus Carnival Cruise Line debate. But there's more to the story. So I'm going to break it down after this. We'll talk about the criteria. I'll share with you some of the other categories where they've ranked cruise lines, tell you which cruise lines did best. And then I have a criteria that I think they should add, which to me is a super important criteria that I think would make this survey better. So all that coming up in today's video. Hang out for a second. Let me play the fun music, and we'll jump into it right after that. Let's start with the criteria. The U.S. News and World Report survey uses 3 primary pieces of criteria to determine an overall score for a cruise ship and a cruise line, and that is how they rank them. The first criteria, they have a set of travel experts. They took 176 cruise ships and they put it to the test by their travel experts. These might be people on their editorial staff. These could be people that they engage to write articles for them. And they took the 176 ships and had those experts rank those ships with a numerical ranking. That became part of the overall score for the cruise line. The second criteria are reviews on cruiseline.com. When people submit reviews on cruiseline.com, they also assign the cruise ship a numerical score, and that score also went with the expert score to determine the overall score for the cruise line. And the final piece of information they used to determine the overall score was the Vehicle Sanitation Program score. That is the score that is determined by health inspections provided by the CDC. Cruise ships scoring 85 or higher are considered satisfactory. Below 85 is considered unsatisfactory. We've done a few news stories about that. I will link the one for the recent score for the Carnival Fantasy, where they redeemed themselves from their worst score ever. I will leave a link above and in the description below, just so you get a sense of what the Vehicle Sanitation Program is. But that score was also used to determine the ranking. So all 3 of those criteria were put together, and then they fleshed out a series of rankings based on category, including best cruise line for the money. So I'm going to break down some of the other categories, the top 3 in some of the other categories, and then I'm going to give you the full 8 cruise lines that were considered the best cruise lines for the money toward the end of the video, because I want to talk about this criteria and whether I think it's valid or not. But let's hit some of the highlights of some of the other criteria just to give you a sense of how the survey works. Okay, so we'll start off for luxury. These are the top 3 luxury cruise lines according to the criteria that we laid out previously. Number 3 on the list, Crystal Cruises. Number 2, Seabourn Cruise Line. And number 1 for luxury on the U.S. News and World Report travel survey for 2020 is Viking Ocean Cruises. This one could be interesting for families. Number 3 on the list, Carnival Cruise Lines. Number 2, Royal Caribbean International. And number 1, Disney Cruise Lines. For couples, and this one almost matches the luxury list. Crystal Cruises was number 3, Seabourn Cruise Lines number 2, and Viking Ocean Liners the number 1 for couples. Now jumping over to the Mediterranean, number 3 on the list, Viking Ocean Cruises. Number 2, Crystal Cruises, and number 1, Seabourn Cruise Lines. And in the Caribbean, an interesting top 3, Seabourn Cruise Line, Royal Caribbean International in the number 2 spot, and Disney Cruise Lines, number 1. All right, now the list of the top 8 cruise lines for the money. Coming in at number 8 with a fleet size of 13 ships, it's Costa Cruises. Number 7 on the list with a fleet size of 17 ships, MSC Cruises. Number 6 on our list with 15 ships in the fleet, Holland America. Coming in at number 5 with a fleet of 28 ships, it's Carnival Cruise Lines. Number 4 on the list with 18 ships in their fleet is Princess Cruises. Number 3 with a fleet size of 17 ships is Norwegian Cruise Line. Number 2 with 10 ships in the fleet, Celebrity Cruises. And as we've said already, number 1, the 24 ship fleet of Royal Caribbean International. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with the criteria used to come up with this list. I don't hate the data. It makes sense to me. They've got 3 different criteria. You got the expert score, you got the regular cruiser score, and you got the health inspection score. Those are pretty broad. It's not skewed one way or the other, and I think those are good criteria. One criteria I'd like to see maybe put in place, 1 or 2 criteria. Number 1 is, you know, the amount of ports that you can cruise out of, and number 2, itinerary. Carnival came in 5th on that list, but I got to give Carnival credit. If you're somebody who doesn't live close to Florida or the West Coast, if you're just in the heartland of America or somewhere north on the East Coast, it could be hard to get to those places. You got to fly. It's a long drive. Carnival does a really great job of spreading cruise ports for embarkation across the United States. I know that's a U.S.-centric kind of comment, but much of the cruise volume that happens does come out of North America, and North American cruisers are on the rise, and the challenge can be getting all the way down to Florida. So I think if you add that component in, I think that Carnival should be higher up on the list. We did track a lot of news stories this year of Carnival ships not doing well on their health inspection, and I think maybe that could have skewed them and put them further down in the list. I think at the end of the day, for most cruisers, the conversation is going to be which cruise line should you go on in the modern era? Should you go on Royal Caribbean or should you go on Carnival Cruise? I think that is the Coke versus Pepsi debate, and I think at the end of it, you're going to be loyal to one or the other. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are. I've been a Coke drinker forever, and I don't think I'll ever convert over to Pepsi. And so sometimes it's more than just the data. Sometimes it is what's in that human spirit and loyalty. If you're a new cruiser and you're asking the question, which cruise line should you go on? The answer is complicated. Every cruise line has its own unique personality. But I think if you go on a Carnival cruise or if you go on a Royal Caribbean cruise, you're going to get a sense of what modern cruising is, and then from there you can step off and go on a more refined path. If you want something that's more traditional, you could go to Princess Cruises, for example, or if you want something that's more modern but eclectic, you can go on Celebrity. There's a lot of options out there, but I think for anybody that's wanting to get into the cruiser space and want to get a sense of it, I would recommend Carnival or Royal Caribbean, and then you can be a part of this debate. Which one is better? But I do like these data-driven results. And I know it's easy to dismiss statistics, but big props to U.S. News and World Report. They've been doing this year over year. They've continued to refine their criteria, and I'm okay with this survey. I think I would point people to it, and so it's not a bad list to look at. I do think there's some other considerations to throw in there, but overall, I think it's a good list. So from a community perspective, I know that, again, the Coke versus Pepsi debate, the Royal Caribbean versus Carnival debate, it's well documented and well discussed in a lot of different places on cruises. So my challenge for the comments is this. Write down who your favorite cruise line is, what you're loyal to, and then based off of some of this information, what's a cruise line that you would like to try that you have never tried before? I would love to see in the comments that kind of conversation. Hey, thanks so much for stopping by. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you find this information helpful or entertaining. Again, my name's Tony with Lido Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.